Alright, loving the time of cholera. Chapter 5, we're going to power through to the end of this one, and then we'll be on the way to chapter 6. So we're starting at the top of 259. Alright. It was not the only thing that came to an end that night. The evil lie about the pavilion of consumptives had ruined his sleep, for it had instilled in him the inconceivable idea that Fermina Daza was mortal, and as a consequence might die before her husband. But when he saw her stumble at the door of the movie theater by his own volition, he took another step toward the abyss with a sudden realization that he, and not she, might be the first one to die. It was the most fearful kind of presentiment because it was based on reality. The years of immobilized waiting, of hoping for good luck, were behind him, but on the horizon he could see nothing more than the unfathomable sea of imaginary illnesses, the drop-by-drop urinations of sleepless nights, the daily death at twilight. He thought that all the moments in the day, which had once been his allies and sworn accomplices, were beginning to conspire against him. A few years before he had gone to a dangerous assignment, his heart heavy with terror of what might happen, and he had found the door unlocked and the hinges recently oiled so that he could come in without a sound. But he repented at the last moment for fear of causing a decent married woman irreparable harm by dying in her bed. So that it was reasonable to think that the woman he loved most on earth, the one he had waited for from one century to the next without a sigh of disenchantment, might not have the opportunity to lead him by the arm across a street full of lunar grave mounds and beds of wind-blown poppies in order to help him reach the other side of death in safety. The truth is that, by the standards of this time, Florentino Ariza had crossed the line into old age. He was 56, well-preserved years old, and he thought them well-lived because they were years of love. But no man of the time would have braved the ridicule of looking young at his age, even if he did or thought he did, and none would have dared to confess without shame that he still wept in secret over a rebuff received in the previous century. It was a bad time for being young. There was a style of dress for each age, but the style of old age began soon after adolescence and lasted until the grave. More than age, it was a matter of social dignity. The young men dressed like their grandfathers, they made themselves more respectable with premature spectacles, and a walking stick was looked upon with favor after the age of 30. For women there were only two ages, the age for marrying, which did not go past 22, and the age for being eternal spinsters, the ones left behind. The others, the married women, the mothers, the widows, the grandmothers, were a race apart, who tallied their age not in relation to the number of years they had lived, but in relation to the time left to them before they died. Florentino Ariza, on the other hand, faced the insidious snares of old age with savage temerity, even though he knew that his peculiar fate had been to look like an old man from the time he was a boy. At first it was a matter of necessity. Transito Ariza pulled apart and then sewed together again for him the clothes that his father decided to discard, so that he went to primary school wearing frock coats that dragged on the ground when he sat down, and ministerial hats that came down over his ears despite the cotton batting on the inside to make them smaller. Since he had also worn glasses for myopia from the age of 5, and had his mother's Indian hair, as bristly and coarse as horsehair, his appearance clarified nothing. It was fortunate that after so much governmental instability, because of so many superimposed civil wars, academic standards were less selective than they had been, and there was a jumble of backgrounds and social positions in the public schools. Half-grown children would come to class from the barricades smelling of gunpowder, wearing the insignias and uniforms of rebel officers captured at gunpoint in inclusive battles, and carrying their regulation weapons in full view at their waists. They shot each other over disagreements in the playground. They threatened the teachers if they received low grades on examinations, and one of them, a third-year student at La Salle Academy, had a retired colonel in the militia shot and killed Brother Juan Eremita, prefect of the community, because he said in catechism class that God was a full-fledged member of the Conservative Party. On the other hand, the sons of the great ruined families were dressed like old-fashioned princes, and some very poor boys went barefoot. Among so many oddities originating in so many places, Florentino Ariza was certainly among the oddest, but not at the point of attracting undue attention. The harshest thing he heard was when someone shouted to him in the street, "When you're ugly and poor, you can only want more." In any event, the apparel imposed by necessity became, from that time on and for the rest of his life, the kind best suited to his enigmatic nature and solemn character. When he was promoted to his first important position in the RCC, he had clothes made to order in the same style as those of his father, whom he recalled as an old man who had died at Christ's venerable age of 33. So that Florentino Ariza always looked much older than he was. As a matter of fact, the loose-tongued Brigida Zuleta, a brief love who dished up unwashed truths, told him on the first day that she liked him better without his clothes because he looked 20 years younger when he was naked. However, he never knew how to remedy that, first because his personal taste would not allow him to dress in any other way, and second because at the age of 20 no one knew how to dress like a younger man, unless he were to take his short pants and a sailor hat out of the closet again. On the other hand, he himself could not escape the notion of old age current in his day, so it was to be expected that when he saw Fermina Daza stumble at the door of the movie theater, he would be shaken by a thunderbolt of panic that death, the son of a bitch, would win an irreparable victory in his fierce war of love. Until that time, his greatest battle, fought tooth and nail and lost without glory, was against baldness. From the moment he saw the first hairs tangled in his comb, he knew that he was condemned to a hell whose torments cannot be imagined by those who do not suffer them. He struggled for years. There was not a pomade or lotion he did not try, a belief he did not accept, a sacrifice he did not endure, in order to defend every inch of his head against the ravages of that devastation. He memorized the agricultural information in the Bristol Almanac because he had heard that there was a direct relationship between the growth of hair and the harvesting cycles. He left the totally bald barber he had used all his life for a foreign newcomer who cut hair only when the moon was in the first quarter. The new barber had begun to demonstrate that in fact he had a fertile hand when it was discovered that he was wanted by several Antillean police Antillean police forces for raping novices, and he was taken away in chains. By then, Florentino Ariza had cut out every advertisement concerning baldness that he found in the newspapers of the Caribbean basin, the ones in which they printed two pictures of the same man, first as bald as a melon, and then with more hair than a lion, before and after using the infallible cure. After 6 years, he had tried 172 of them, in addition to complimentary treatments that appeared on the labels of the bottles, and all that he achieved was an itching, foul-smelling eczema of the scalp called ringworm borealis by the medicine man of the Martinique, because it had emitted a phosphorescent glow in the dark. As a last resort, he had recourse to all the herbs that the Indians hawked in the public market and to all the magical specifics and oriental potions sold in the arcade of the scribes. But by the time he realized that he had been swindled, he already had the tonsure of a saint. In the year 1900, while the Civil War of 1,000 Days bled the country, an Italian who made custom-fitted wigs of human hair came to the city. The wigs cost a fortune, and the manufacturer took no responsibility after 3 months of use. But there were few solvent bald men who did not succumb to the temptation. Florentino Ariza was one of the first. He tried on a wig that was so similar to his own hair that he was afraid it would stand on end with its changes in mood. But he could not accept the idea of wearing a dead man's hair on his head. His only consolation was that his raging baldness meant that he would not have to watch his hair turn gray. One day, one of the genial drunks on the river docks embraced him with more enthusiasm than usual when he saw him leave the office, and then he removed Florentino Ariza's hat to the mocking laughter of the stevedores that gave him a resounding kiss on the head. "Hairless wonder," he shouted. Gonna have to stop.